Don't you hate having to constantly battle algae? Keep watching for an easy step-by-step maintenance routine for getting rid of algae and preventing it from coming back. Hi, I'm a gamer's wife here with practical and proven tips to help busy aquarists like you. And as much as I love planted aquariums, I hate doing water changes nowadays because of how much time it takes to remove algae. Back when I had fake plants only, I'd only turn on the aquarium lights if I was standing directly in front of the tank because, well, Mama taught me not to waste electricity, right? Consequently, I never had a problem with algae and water changes were a breeze. Now that I have live aquarium plants, yeah, I use timers with my lights, I dose fertilizers, do regular water changes, I do everything right, and I still battle algae. Seriously, it's like killing my planted tank mojo. Now, one of the most annoying things you can say to a planted tank beginner with algae problems is balance your tank, because beginners have no idea what that means in practical terms. So I'm gonna simplify for you the most common causes of algae and then walk you through detailed instructions for how to fight it and prevent it from coming back. Okay, first off, there are a ton of causes for algae. But here are the most common ones. The number one biggest trigger for algae is excess nutrients or organic waste in the water. In nature, algae doesn't grow in sterile conditions. It grows in nice, nutrient-rich bodies of water. In aquariums, it's easy for organic waste to build up if you're not doing regular water changes and filter maintenance. If you're overfeeding your fish or the tank is overstocked, remember that food in equals poo out. Or if you don't have good enough circulation in the tank, which can cause pockets of debris buildup. Ideally, you want just enough nutrients or fertilizer in the water to feed your plants and have nothing left over for the algae to eat. Another common cause for algae is too much light. This factor is particularly important for less heavily planted tanks or aquariums that have mostly slow-growing plants. You can view my lighting video linked in the corner and description for more details, but I highly recommend that you get a proper light made specifically for planted aquariums. Put it on a timer so that your plants always get a consistent amount of light each day, somewhere between 8 to 10 hours, less if you're just getting started. And then if you're still having issues, consider adjusting the intensity or height of the light, aka how far the light is from the top of the tank. Obviously, if you don't have any live plants, just do what I did and leave the lights off unless you're standing in front of the tank. Problem solved. Speaking of which, the final most common reason for algae growth is because you don't have a large, healthy mass of plants. So this scenario applies to you if you have no plants, very few plants, or your plants aren't growing very well. Just like algae, plants love lights and nutrients, so if you can get a healthy crop of plants growing to outcompete and consume these building blocks faster than the algae, you'll see a significant decrease in your algae problems. If you already have good lighting and a good planted tank substrate, and you've already solved any issues with excess nutrients in the water, consider using an easy all-in-one fertilizer that contains all the macro and micronutrients your plant needs to grow well. I like to use a combination of Aquarium Co-op's Easy Green and Seachem's Flourish Advance for liquid fertilization. And then I have Seachem Flourish tabs as a solid type of fertilizer you can stick in the substrate for plants that are heavy root feeders. All of these products are linked in the description. And lastly, carbon dioxide is another key building block for healthy plant growth. I currently only run low-tech tanks, so good surface agitation is sufficient for my plants. But CO2 injection can really speed up the growth if you are willing and have the time to keep a high-tech, high-maintenance planted aquarium. Okay, let's get into this step-by-step guide on how to fight algae. I've got 2 maintenance routines here that I learned from Pet Zone Tropical Fish. The first one is a short-term plan for emergency situations where you have a major problem that needs to be tackled now. Once the algae is a little more under control, the second method is for preventative maintenance to keep your aquarium algae-free in the long term. Okay, first we're going to cover the emergency surgery mode. So the permanent changes, well at least for this duration that you're going to make, are to set your lighting timer for 6 hours a day and then increase the surface agitation with a air stone or sponge filter to improve oxygen and carbon dioxide gas exchange. This component is often overlooked, but plants and beneficial bacteria both need good oxygen. On a daily basis, you'll want to remove any dead or old leaves that you see. And then twice a week, it's time for a water change. Remove any algae from the glass and plants and consider scrubbing the hardscape under running water. Then do a 50% water change and make sure to vacuum the substrate thoroughly. And then once a month, clean your filter, especially the sponges and filter pads that collect debris. Definitely don't want any excess organics in the water. The reason why I typically don't use chemicals is because it's often a very harsh treatment option that could harm your plants or fish. Plus, it may be only a temporary solution since we're still not removing the original cause of the algae. Once you have things under control, let's go to regular maintenance mode. For permanent changes, you're gonna set your lighting timer for 8 to 10 hours a day, so feel free to experiment a little. On a weekly basis, you wanna prune your plants and remove any dead or old leaves. Do a 25 to 50% water change and vacuum the substrate thoroughly. If you have a low-tech tank, now is the time you can dose your all-in-one liquid fertilizer. But if you have a high-tech tank, you may need to do this 2 to 3 times a week. Every 1 to 2 months, clean your filter and filter pads as usual, and then every 3 to 4 months, this is optional, but you can add root tab fertilizers to your substrate if needed. A few bonus suggestions I didn't mention in these 2 maintenance routines include add more plant density to your aquarium, especially fast-growing ones. I started off with only slow-growing plants and really suffered from their inability to compete with algae. Consider getting an algae cleanup crew to help you fight the good fight, because you'll never kill 100% of the algae. I'd recommend a mono shrimp, snails, and autosynclus catfish for nano tanks, and then maybe bristlenose plecos or Siamese algae eaters for larger tanks. And finally, the instructions I provided are a good starting point, but you'll really want to further balance your tank. I'll cover exactly how I do it in a future video, but in the meanwhile, you can start tweaking your fertilizer dosing. Don't be afraid to increase or decrease the amount, and look for specific signs of nutrient deficiencies in your plants so you know exactly what to add more of. I'll link some helpful charts in the description for you to look at. If you really want to take your planted tank to the next level and avoid some of the common mistakes I made, check out the short playlist I made for you over here and subscribe so you won't miss future tutorials. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.